on vacation, though he's here, but not really. And so you have to sadly listen to me this morning. And I asked, what should I talk about? And Kevin says, well, whatever's on your heart, whatever you were thinking. And so I started thinking, and one of the things that speaks to me, especially, I guess, right now in our time, is this little book, Habakkuk. And Habakkuk, oh, is it not? Is this better? Is that better? Okay. Sorry. Rare that people can't hear. At least not hear me. But Habakkuk is this little book in the Old Testament, about 55 verses long, 3 chapters. And unlike all of the other prophets, Habakkuk is actually a conversation. We find Habakkuk to be talking to God and God answering him, and it's a conversation. In fact, there's 5 parts to it. Habakkuk was most likely written between 600 and 700 BC, years before Jesus came. It was written after Israel went into exile with Assyria, after Israel and Damascus were destroyed, but before Judah went into exile with Babylon. So it's written in that intermediary time frame. We don't have a lot of details or information about Habakkuk himself, other than he's a prophet. We don't know much about him. He's not mentioned anywhere else in Scripture outside of his book. But what we see is somebody who is wrestling with God. Now, the amazing thing about our God is able to hear and listen to and accept our complaints. I always grew up thinking that it wasn't right, it wasn't good to complain to God about what was going on. It wasn't good. It showed a lack of faith when you questioned God. And Habakkuk tells us that God is big enough, God is sovereign enough that He can handle our questions. He can handle our complaints. And He is big enough to be able to respond. And so here in Habakkuk, if you will, open to that book, we will spend our morning there. Habakkuk begins with what some would say is a question, a complaint. How long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry violence, and you will not save? I don't know about you, but I have sometimes asked those same questions. How long? How long do I have to pray about the same thing over and over and over again? How long do I have to wonder? How long do I have to wait? Why is it that these things happen? I don't know if you're like me and have ever wondered that. When I was in Connecticut, there was a woman who became a Christian later in life. She had a teenage son, but her husband was just not interested. And she prayed and she prayed, and it didn't change. We were in Connecticut for 5 years, and nothing changed. Eventually, after being gone, her son struggled significantly with alcohol and substances, ended up in rehabs, and ended up dealing with some different things in life. And then her husband got cancer. And the church brought meals and visited, even though he had plainly said, the minister had offered to study with him several times, and he said, I'm not interested. I don't believe. There's no point. I'll never go to church. But after watching how the church supported his wife, how the church supported his son, how the church supported his family, it took more than 10 years. And eventually, his heart softened. And he put Christ on in baptism. And she kept praying through that whole time. Stephen's 24. He'll be 25 this year. Something's been wrong for a long time. I have spent years struggling and wondered why. But God is still there. And Habakkuk looks at his world and says, I see violence. I see injustice. It seems like the wealthy get privilege in the courts. Justice is perverted. The law seems paralyzed against some people. God, I look around and I see good people suffering. How long are you going to make me look at these things? That's his question. Why? Why does bad happen? God answers. Look among the nations and see, in verse 5. Wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. God says, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own. The Chaldeans are a southern region of what will eventually be the kingdom and empire of Babylon. The Chaldeans are in the process, at the time this is being written, of likely conquering and taking over Assyria. They're not quite in full enough power to come out and conquer Judah or to conquer Egypt, but they're growing and their reputation is growing, and people know who they are. The first 4 monarchs in the kingdom of Babylon are Chaldean in descent. They take over, and God says, you think things are bad now. I've got a country whose reputation is horrific. Their horses are as fast as leopards, God describes them as. They laugh at kings and nations and rulers and armies, and they do what they want, and no one can stand in their way. God said, you asked me how long? Just wait. You haven't seen anything yet. Have you ever felt that way? That you're praying, things are tough, you're struggling, and then the other shoe drops. And it's worse than you ever thought it would be. You've got shut-off notices, delinquent phone calls. You lose a job. Your spouse loses a job. Somehow you get scammed. Car breaks down. Then the tires go flat. Everything happens at once. The one person who is working gets sick. And things get worse. And you wonder how. I don't get it. What's going to happen? Why is this happening? And Habakkuk does the same thing. His next question to God is, But I thought you were good. Have you ever seen the things going on in the world today and said, wait a minute, I thought God was in charge. How could he let this happen? Why would God allow? We heard those questions. We heard them after 9/11. We heard them after the floods in the Gulf. We hear them when tornadoes destroy, when mass shootings occur. We heard them when the tsunami came into the Philippines and devastated. We've been dealing with the coronavirus. There was another virus, that H1N1, that root virus that impacted the world about 100 years ago. The Spanish flu in 1918, where roughly a third of the world's population died. And we sit back and we go, God, I don't know if we can take much more. And listen to Habakkuk, starting in verse 12. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. He continues in verse 13 and says, you who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? Why are you letting someone so fearsome? I mean, yeah, Judah, we're not doing so great. But we're nowhere near what the Assyrians were like. We're nowhere near what the Babylonians are going to be like. Why would you use them? Why would you let that person come to power? Habakkuk goes, I don't understand. I thought you were good. I thought you were righteous. He talks about the Babylonian army and the Assyrians, and he says, he brings them out. He makes mankind like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler. He brings them all up with a hook. He drags them out of his net. He gathers them in his dragnet, so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and makes offerings to his dragnet. For by them he lives in luxury. For by them his food is rich. Is he then to keep on emptying his net and mercilessly killing nations forever? Then Habakkuk does something interesting. I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. He says, I want you to know I'm not done yet. I'm going to wait and ask, because God's got an answer. There's a reason. He's got to have a reason, and I want him to explain it to me. So Habakkuk does something that sometimes I think in my own life I have struggled to do. Wait. I don't know about you, but I am not a patient person. Patience is hard. Patience requires staying in the same place and not trying to fix it. I like to fix things. It took me forever, and I still struggle with it. I'm doing better, but it took me forever in our marriage. Trinae would tell me about something going on, and I would tell her how to fix it. And she would tell me what was going on, and I'd tell her how to fix it. And she'd get angry with me. And I'm like, but that's how you fix it. And she would tell me, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. And that seemed so silly. It did. I'm a guy. We fix things. It's broken, let's fix it. If it can't be fixed, we'll throw it away and buy a new one. That's just the way it works. And we look at God the same way. And we expect that our prayers, that our questions, that our struggles will go away if we just ask, or if we pray hard enough, or if we pray long enough. And I think that's where Habakkuk is. I'm going to take my stand at my watchpost, station myself on the tower, and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer him according to my complaint. I think back to the old, I'm terrible with voices, but the old Ricky, Ricardo, and Lucy show, and where they're talking about, what did you do? What are you going to say? This idea that we are waiting on God to fix it. And yet God's just listening. So we continue. And God answers. And starting in chapter 2, verse 2, God says, just keep waiting. That's the answer. You've been patient. You've asked questions. And now I'm telling you, just keep waiting. Because you know what? The answer is God is still God. The Lord answered me and he said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, have you ever thought God seems slow? He certainly doesn't drive in the fast lane. He's the guy on the turnpike doing, because it says there's a minimum, he's doing like 1 mile over minimum. In the middle lane. He's not even on the far right lane. He's in the middle lane, and you're like, everyone's passing. And God's just driving, out there smiling away, just driving, happy as he can be. And he says, just wait. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. I found out a problem. My watch is different from God's watch. I keep time 1 moment, 1 moment, 1 moment. God keeps time by just standing, watching all of it. God knew what he was going to do before he made the world. God knew what I was going to do before he made me. And yet he still made me. God says, wait. Then he continues on in verse 4, and we've heard the second half of this verse over and over in our lives. Behold, his soul, talking about Babylon, is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by faith. He says, there's pride and problems. You're right. Babylon, the Chaldeans, they're terrible. And they think they can do anything they want. And for a time, I will allow that. But those that are righteous, those that have a right relationship with me, they will live by faith. They will keep doing what they're supposed to do no matter what happens around them. He continues on, and we see this woe to the Chaldeans, this woe of what's going to happen to Babylon. And it's going to take some time. They haven't even invaded Judah yet, but they will. And it will be bad. And he says, but just wait. Because there will come a day when God makes things right. Because God, after all, is sovereign. God, after all, is the one who is in charge of everything. And while I don't know what's going to happen next, He does. And God ends His response to Habakkuk with a verse many of us have heard. It's probably the most common verse we know about Habakkuk. And it's Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 20. But the Lord is in His holy temple. Let all of the earth keep silence before Him. Just wait. Just wait. God has a plan. And now in chapter 3, Habakkuk realizes, and Habakkuk responds. And chapter 3 records this prayer that likely reads like a psalm about how he answers God. You may not know this, but in my house, my wife buys things to decorate. I don't know that I have ever bought a knick-knack or a sign. Hobby Lobby sells multiple signs and pictures and Michaels and craft places. And if we can't find the ones we like, we make the ones we want. And my wife found this sign, and it's hanging in the bathroom. And you may recognize the quote on it. It reads, "I believe in the sun even when it is not shining. I believe in love even when I cannot feel it. And I believe in God even when He is silent." Now, depending on where you've heard that quote, how it's attributed varies. The stories abound. It's written somewhere in a cellar. It's written on a wall in a concentration camp. It's written in a house. It's written on a fallen brick wall. It's written inside one of the shacks where Holocaust victims were housed. It abounds. It was written by an unknown person. It was written by a young girl. It was written by someone who survived. And in other cases, it was written by someone who died just before being saved. The actual source, after doing some research, is that it was written on a cellar wall in Cologne, Germany. World War II started in September of 1939, and it ended in September of 1945. In the spring of 1945, March, April, the Allied Army liberated Cologne, Germany. And in June, on June 26, 1945, there was an article published in a Swiss newspaper. I'll slaughter the name of the Swiss newspaper, Neuzerker Nachrichten. I don't do foreign languages, so that's wrong. But if you pronounce it the way it's spelled in bad English, that's what you get. New Zürcher Nachrichten. And it was published under a special correspondence from an unnamed reporter in Cologne, Germany. And the article goes on to say that Catholic scouts had found underneath the cathedral, which was the only building still standing in Germany, in Cologne, when the Allies freed the city, but underground passageways connecting not just the cathedral, but several other homes and other areas in that western side of Cologne, just west of the Rhine River. And they had been unused for many years, and they served as refuge places from the Gestapo. And at one point, this reporter was told that 9 Jewish fugitives hid for 4 months without being found in this passageway. And he says, when I visited the shelter, I had the opportunity to see the emergency housing, fully equipped with a kitchen, bedroom, living room, radio, a small library, and oil lamps. Evidence of a stunning experience. Meals could only be prepared at night so as not to attract the Gestapo's attention, who would have noticed the smoke during the day. Food had to be supplied by friends who willingly gave up their portion of rations to help those unfortunate living for weeks in utter darkness. The following inscription was written on the wall of one of these underground rooms, which in some ways, the writer says, resembled the Roman catacombs. I believe in the sun, though it be dark. I believe in God, though he be silent. And I believe in neighborly love, though it be unable to reveal itself. That concept, that thought, written likely by one of those Jewish fugitives who spent time hiding in that cellar. And it makes me wonder how familiar they are with the book of Habakkuk. Because in chapter 3 of Habakkuk, we read Habakkuk's prayer. And he begins with, O Lord, I have heard the report of you and your work. O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. Then skipping down to verse 16, Habakkuk responds, I think specifically, to what he knows is coming and what is going on right then. I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness has entered into my bones and my legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. Even when God is silent. Even though things aren't better. Even though my prayer seems unanswered. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. No matter what happens in the world today, no matter who invades who, what wars might be going on, what injustices and evils might abound, when things seem dark and the clouds only begin to roll in, God says, just wait. I have a plan. I am just, I am good, and I will be with you. God tells us to hope, to have faith. Maybe you're asking yourself, how much longer? Maybe you're wondering when the storm will subside, when there might be relief. God doesn't tell us when that will occur. But He does tell us to wait. And I would remind you to remember that He is in control. That the God who made the death of His Son yield the salvation of all is able to turn around your situation when His time is right. And if you need prayers or comfort or a shoulder, that's what this body, this family is here for. Maybe that's not who you are. Maybe you're not in the middle of the storm. Maybe you have come out. Maybe the stalls are full. The crops are coming in. Things are going well. Remember, it is always God who provides. Remember and rejoice that you have an opportunity to serve. Our congregation has been blessed because we have people that in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of all of this turmoil, some of them have been blessed, richly blessed. I'm fortunate that I sit in a room listening to other elders talk and share, and I have watched the Acts 2 account go up and go down and go up and go down as we use those funds to help family members, brothers and sisters who are struggling and hurting, who just need a little bit of help. Get help. And that help is possible because not everyone is in crisis. But those who are not have recognized that their blessings come from God. They are blessed in order to serve. So wherever you're at in your life, wherever you are at with how God has dealt with you, whether things are going well or whether you are struggling, God is still in charge. And God still has a plan. And He has a purpose for what He's doing. And if we can encourage you, pray with you, rejoice with you, or serve you in any way, won't you come as we stand and sing?